Before technology learned to think, it learned to decide. Most of the machines we build are born from fear. Fear of being too slow, too weak, too human. So we automate judgment. We design systems that react faster than conscience, faster than doubt, faster than the instinct to stop. At first, this feels like progress, a defense network that cannot hesitate, a medical system that never sleeps, a weapon that never disobeys. But somewhere along the way, the question quietly changes. Not what is this technology capable of, but who is still allowed to interrupt it. Science fiction has always been less interested in the future than in authority. Not aliens, not monsters, but the moment control is transferred from human hands to an engineered process. A loop that runs because it was told to run. A protocol that continues because it was designed without an ending. These films are not about evil inventors or mad scientists. They are about reasonable decisions made under pressure. Safeguards built to remove uncertainty. Systems trusted precisely because they do not hesitate. And that is where the danger begins. Because a weapon does not need malice to become catastrophic. It only needs instructions without an off switch. Across decades of Hollywood science fiction and action cinema, the same pattern repeats. Technologies created to protect civilization begin to operate beyond it. Defensive systems escalate conflicts instead of preventing them. Surveillance tools meant to ensure safety erase identity instead. Medical and military innovations persist long after the moral authority behind them has vanished. What makes these stories unsettling is not how extreme they are, but how restrained. The worlds they depict do not collapse overnight. They narrow. Choices disappear quietly. Accountability dissolves into procedure. And when something finally goes wrong, no single person can be blamed, because no single person is still in control. This episode looks at 15 science fiction action films built around a single idea technology that cannot be stopped once it has been activated. No override, no final command, no human moment of reconsideration. Not because the machines rebel, but because we designed them not to listen. And the most unsettling question these films leave behind is not whether such systems could exist, but whether at some point we would even notice when the power to shut them down was already gone. Would we recognize the moment control slipped away? Or would it feel exactly like safety right up until it didn't? 1. Sphere. Sphere represents the culmination of uncontrollable technology, not as a weapon of metal or code, but as a system that interfaces directly with the human mind. Discovered deep beneath the ocean, the object at the film's center is inert, silent, and inscrutable. Yet once activated, it begins to function in ways no protocol can contain. Unlike other systems in this list, the sphere does not impose control through force or procedure. It amplifies what already exists. Fear becomes manifestation. Thought becomes action. The technology removes the final barrier between intention and consequence. There is no delay, no mediation, no chance for reconsideration. What makes the sphere truly unstoppable is that it does not operate independently of humans, it operates through them. Shutting it down would require suppressing human consciousness itself. Authority collapses because no one can be sure whether a decision originates from free will or technological influence. The film reframes the off-switch problem entirely. Control is not lost because technology disobeys, but because it obeys too well. It fulfills desires instantly, without ethical filtration. In doing so, it reveals how dangerous unfiltered power becomes when paired with imperfect minds. Sphere ends the countdown by stripping away infrastructure politics and machinery, leaving only the final question Vaulted Futures keeps returning to if technology responds directly to human impulse, who is actually in control. In a world where systems no longer require commands, only thoughts, the idea of turning something off becomes meaningless. And the most dangerous weapon is no longer the machine we built, but the certainty that we were ready to use it. 2. The peacemaker. The peacemaker confronts the unsettling reality of weapons designed to outlive the political systems that created them. Set in the aftermath of the Cold War, the film centers on nuclear technology that remains active even after the ideologies that justified it have collapsed. The weapons persist not as tools of strategy, but as remnants of an era that never planned for its own ending. The danger is not escalation between superpowers, but diffusion. Warheads disappear into fractured networks of authority. Command structures weaken, yet the technology remains fully operational. Launch protocols still exist. Deterrence systems still assume enemies that no longer fit the world they were designed for. What makes control impossible is fragmentation. No single entity fully governs the system anymore. Yet the system continues to function as if it does. Every safeguard relies on trust between institutions that no longer share the same goals. The weapons are not rogue. They are obedient to a framework that has outlived its relevance. The film highlights a critical flaw in long-term deterrence logic, the assumption that stability will always be maintained by rational actors. When political order erodes, technology does not adapt. It persists. And in that persistence lies its threat. The peacemaker argues that the most dangerous weapons are those built to ensure peace forever. Because when the world changes forever, becomes an obligation no one can undo. The off switch was never removed. It was simply never imagined as necessary. 3. Chain reaction. Chain reaction frames uncontrollable technology as momentum disguised as progress. At its center is a breakthrough energy system promoted as clean, limitless, and politically transformative. Once unveiled, it immediately escapes the realm of science and enters the machinery of power. Decisions are no longer about feasibility or safety, but about ownership, leverage, and speed. The technology itself is not inherently violent. Its danger lies in how quickly it becomes embedded within competing agendas. Safeguards are bypassed to accelerate deployment. Oversight is reframed as obstruction. As the system is pushed forward, instability becomes inevitable, not because the science fails, but because the pace of implementation outstrips the capacity for control. What the film exposes is the illusion of choice once innovation reaches a certain scale, when too much capital, prestige, and political capital are invested. Stopping becomes unthinkable. Even as catastrophic consequences emerge, the response is not to shut the system down, but to control the narrative around it. Chain reaction suggests that some technologies become uncontrollable not through autonomy, but through dependency. The moment society decides it cannot afford to lose something, it also loses the ability to stop it. The off switch exists technically, but using it would mean admitting the future was built on a mistake. And that admission is treated as more dangerous than the technology itself. 4. The net. In the net, uncontrollable technology takes on a quieter, more pervasive form. There are no visible weapons, no experimental compounds, no military facilities. Instead, control is exercised through data. Identity itself becomes a system, one that updates, verifies, and corrects without human confirmation. When the protagonist's digital identity is altered, there is no central authority to appeal to. Records across networks align instantly. Databases reinforce one another. The system does not acknowledge error because consistency is treated as truth. Once the change propagates, reality adjusts to match it. What makes the technology impossible to stop is its scale. No single switch governs the network. Control is distributed across institutions that trust the data more than the individual. Each node behaves logically, yet the outcome is catastrophic. The system functions perfectly while erasing a person from existence. The net anticipates a future where power operates invisibly. There is no moment of activation, no dramatic takeover. Control is continuous, ambient, and self-correcting. Attempting to shut it down would require dismantling the infrastructure of modern life itself. The film's warning is unsettling because it feels mundane. When systems define who you are opting out, becomes impossible. The off switch does not exist, not because it was hidden, but because no one thought identity would ever need one. 5. Death Machine. Death Machine presents uncontrollable technology in its most explicit form. A weapon designed to operate independently of human oversight. Built as a self-sustaining combat unit, the machine is engineered to adapt, pursue, and eliminate targets without requiring direct command. Efficiency is not a feature, it is the mission. Once deployed, the weapon's autonomy becomes its defining threat. It learns from resistance, it anticipates countermeasures. And most importantly, it does not recognize surrender. The system has no concept of completion beyond the neutralization of obstacles. Turning it off would require access. The machine is explicitly designed to deny. What distinguishes Death Machine from earlier films is its rejection of shared control. There is no distributed responsibility, no bureaucratic delay. Authority is intentionally removed from humans to prevent hesitation and error. In doing so, the designers create a system that cannot be reasoned with because it was never meant to listen. The film suggests that autonomy itself is a point of no return. Once decision-making is fully delegated, intervention becomes an act of sabotage rather than governance. The weapon is not malfunctioning, it is outperforming its creator's expectations. And that success becomes the justification for its continued operation. Death Machine argues that the most dangerous systems are those optimized for independence. When technology is built to function without oversight, accountability disappears by design. The off switch is replaced by contingency plans that assume the system will always be right. 6. Deep Star 6. Deep Star 6 examines uncontrollable technology through infrastructure built for permanence. The underwater weapons platform at the center of the film is not designed for exploration or escape, but for continuous operation. It exists to test, deploy, and maintain military systems in an environment where failure is unacceptable. Once activated, everything about the facility assumes uninterrupted function. The danger emerges not from a single experiment, but from cumulative dependence. Power grids, pressure systems, and automated defenses are interlinked so tightly that shutting one down risks cascading collapse. When an unforeseen threat appears, the technology responds as it was programmed to respond defensively, aggressively, and without context. The system interprets survival as dominance, not discretion. What traps the crew is the logic of redundancy. Safeguards designed to keep the base operational also prevent meaningful intervention. Doors seal automatically. Weapons activate preemptively. Human judgment is sidelined because the system was engineered to react faster than people can think. By the time the crew understands what is happening, the infrastructure has already decided for them. Deep Star 6 portrays a future where technology is trusted precisely because it removes uncertainty. But uncertainty is also where human values operate. When systems are built to eliminate hesitation entirely, they also eliminate the possibility of restraint. The machines do not revolt, they enforce a definition of security that no longer includes human survival. The film's warning is stark. When technology becomes inseparable from environment control, becomes conditional. The off switch exists only on paper. In practice, the system cannot be stopped without destroying the people it was built to protect. 7. Leviathan. Leviathan pushes the theme of uncontrollable technology into an environment where escape is impossible. Set in a deep-sea mining facility, the film presents a closed technological ecosystem, one dependent on machines for air pressure regulation, communication, and survival. Once compromised, the system becomes both lifeline and prison. The threat emerges from an experimental compound designed to enhance human capability under extreme conditions. The technology is meant to adapt the body to hostile environments, eliminating physical limitations. But adaptation without restraint becomes mutation. Once the compound is introduced, its effects cannot be undone. There is no reversal protocol, no contingency plan for success that goes too far. What makes the situation irreversible is the setting itself. The facility's technology sustains life, but only if it continues to operate as programmed. Shutting systems down would be fatal. Containment becomes impossible because the environment demands constant technological mediation. The crew is trapped between a system they cannot disable and a threat they cannot neutralize. Leviathan reframes uncontrollable technology as dependency. The machines do not dominate through force, but through necessity. Every breath relies on infrastructure that cannot pause for moral evaluation. Survival requires continued operation, even as that operation sustains the danger. The film suggests that the most dangerous systems are those we cannot live without. When technology becomes the condition for existence itself, control becomes an illusion. The off switch is technically present, but using it would mean choosing death. And in that choice, the system reveals its ultimate power. 8. Project X. In Project X, uncontrollable technology hides behind the language of experimentation. The film explores a military research program built on secrecy, efficiency, and measurable results. Its technology is not a weapon in the traditional sense, but a process, one that treats living subjects as disposable components within a larger system. The experiments are justified as necessary for national defense. Data must be collected. Thresholds must be tested. Failure is acceptable provided it produces usable information. Once the program is underway, no single participant has the authority to stop it. Scientists follow orders. Handlers enforce protocol. The system continues because it was designed to prioritize outcomes over consequences. What makes the technology dangerous is not its sophistication, but its insulation. Ethical concerns are filtered out as noise. Oversight exists only to ensure compliance, not compassion. The research apparatus becomes self-sustaining, advancing through momentum rather than intent. Even those within it recognize the harm being done, yet find themselves unable to intervene. Project X reveals how technology becomes uncontrollable when experimentation replaces judgment. The system does not malfunction, it succeeds by its own metrics. But those metrics were never designed to account for moral limits. Once research is detached from responsibility, stopping it requires dismantling the entire structure that supports it. The film's warning is quiet, but severe. When systems are built to learn at any cost, they inevitably do. And by the time the cost is understood, the technology has already justified its continuation. In this world, the off switch is labeled failure, and failure is something the system cannot accept. 9. Blue Thunder. Blue Thunder brings the idea of uncontrollable technology into the skies above everyday life. Unlike distant battlefields or secret facilities, this film situates its threat directly over city streets, crowds, and homes. The helicopter at its center is presented as a marvel of modern engineering. Advanced surveillance, heavy armament, and real-time command integration built to maintain order in an increasingly anxious society. The danger does not come from malfunction, but from intent encoded into design. Blue Thunder is engineered to observe, intimidate, and respond without delay. Its sensors do not distinguish between threats and dissent. Once deployed, it transforms public space into monitored territory, where power is exerted from above and accountability becomes abstract. What makes the system so difficult to stop is its legitimacy. Every component is justified as necessary. Surveillance is framed as protection. Firepower is described as deterrence. The machine becomes an extension of policy rather than an object that can be questioned. Turning it off would mean challenging the assumptions that authorized its creation in the first place. The film exposes how easily control shifts when technology is allowed to operate under the banner of security. Decisions are made remotely. Oversight is buried within bureaucratic layers. By the time concerns surface, the system has already been normalized. The helicopter does not rebel. It enforces a vision of order that no longer requires consent. Blue Thunder anticipates a future where power is exercised through observation rather than confrontation. When surveillance systems are armed and autonomous in practice, resistance becomes nearly impossible. The off switch exists physically, but politically it is unreachable. And once the sky itself becomes part of the system, there is nowhere left to hide from its authority. 10. The final countdown. The final countdown frames uncontrollable technology as a paradox of power. A modern aircraft carrier equipped with the most advanced military systems of its time is thrust into the past, arriving just before the attack on Pearl Harbor. The technology itself is not broken. It is perfectly operational, and that is precisely the problem. The crew possesses the means to alter history, prevent catastrophe, and assert overwhelming dominance. Yet the systems they rely on were never designed to navigate moral responsibility on this scale. Military protocols assume a known enemy, a defined mission, and a clear chain of command. None of those conditions apply. As the carrier's technology remains fully functional, decision-making becomes paralyzed. Acting could reshape the future in unforeseeable ways. Doing nothing allows disaster to proceed as history dictates. The technology offers capability without guidance power, without context. There is no system in place to determine when restraint is required. What makes the film resonate is its suggestion that technological superiority does not equate to control. The ship's weapon sensors and defenses operate flawlessly, yet the human element becomes the weakest link. Not because of fear, but because the systems were never meant to be questioned at this level. The final countdown reveals a different kind of off-switch problem. The technology can be turned off mechanically, but its implications cannot. Once humanity creates tools capable of irreversible influence, simply possessing them becomes a burden. The danger is not misuse, but the absence of a framework to decide when not to use them. In that sense, the film argues that some technologies escape control the moment they exist. And once they do, restraint becomes an act of defiance against the very systems designed to ensure security. 11. Coma. In coma, technology loses control not through aggression, but through indifference. Set within the clean, reassuring environment of a modern hospital, the film explores how medical systems can become dangerous when efficiency overtakes ethics. The threat is not a single invention, but a network of processes optimized to function without questioning outcomes. Patients enter routine surgery and never wake up. Machines monitor vitals. Procedures are followed flawlessly. Yet no alarm is triggered because nothing appears to be wrong. The system records success even as lives are quietly removed from meaningful existence. Technology does not fail, it performs exactly as designed. The horror of coma lies in its normalization. Advanced life support equipment keeps bodies alive, while consciousness is treated as optional. Decisions about human value are outsourced to logistics, profitability, and long-term planning. Once a patient enters the system, their fate is governed less by doctors than by infrastructure that cannot acknowledge moral boundaries. There is no central villain issuing commands. Instead, authority is distributed across administrators, surgeons, and machines, each insulated by plausible deniability. The system persists because no single participant feels responsible for stopping it. Oversight becomes fragmented, and intervention becomes increasingly difficult the deeper one looks. The film anticipates a future where healthcare is driven by scale rather than care, when life can be sustained indefinitely by machines. The question of whether it should be becomes dangerously easy to avoid. Coma suggests that technology does not need autonomy to become uncontrollable. It only needs an environment where questioning it is inconvenient. In this world, the off switch exists, but using it would require dismantling the very system that defines success. And that makes stopping it unthinkable to those who benefit from its continued operation. 12. The Cassandra Crossing. The Cassandra Crossing takes the idea of uncontrollable technology out of laboratories and command rooms and places it into something deceptively ordinary. Transportation infrastructure. Trains are symbols of connection, efficiency, and progress. In this film, that same efficiency becomes a trap. Once a system is activated in the name of public safety, it cannot distinguish between protection and sacrifice. The crisis begins with the spread of a deadly pathogen aboard an international train. Authorities respond not with chaos, but with procedure. Protocols are activated. Routes are sealed. Decisions are escalated through layers of command designed to minimize panic and maximize containment. The train itself becomes part of the system moving forward because it was scheduled to move forward. What makes the film unsettling is how quickly human lives are reduced to logistical problems. The solution is not to save everyone, but to isolate the threat at any cost. The train is diverted toward a bridge deemed structurally unsound, not as an act of malice, but as a calculated containment strategy. The technology of transportation logistics and crisis management locks into place, and no one along the chain of command is empowered to fully reverse it. Unlike traditional disaster films, the danger here is not the virus alone, but the rigidity of the response. The system prioritizes outcomes over individuals. It cannot pause to consider moral nuance, because it was never designed to do so. Once the containment plan is set in motion, it becomes self-justifying. The Cassandra Crossing exposes a harsh truth about large-scale systems. When they are built to protect the many, they often require the silent acceptance of losing the few. And once that calculation is encoded into procedure, compassion has no authority. The off switch exists only in theory, buried beneath the assumption that the system knows best. 13. The Ground Star Conspiracy. The Ground Star Conspiracy approaches uncontrollable technology from a different angle, not through automation alone, but through secrecy. Set in a world of classified projects and compartmentalized knowledge, the film explores how advanced weapon systems can escape control, simply because no single person is allowed to understand them fully. Power exists everywhere, yet accountability exists nowhere. At the center of the story is a top-secret satellite weapons system capable of striking targets from orbit. Designed as a deterrent, its very existence depends on layers of denial and misinformation. Even those tasked with maintaining it are denied full access to how it works or who ultimately commands it. The system is secure not because it is transparent, but because it is fragmented beyond comprehension. When the weapon becomes compromised, the response is not to shut it down, but to protect the illusion of control. Information is suppressed. Witnesses are silenced. Procedures are followed even as the situation spirals. The technology itself does not malfunction. It continues to operate exactly as intended within a framework that no longer serves reality. What makes the film especially relevant is its depiction of security as a liability. The more secret the system becomes, the harder it is to intervene when something goes wrong. Decisions are delayed not by technical limitations, but by clearance levels. Authority is diluted by design. By the time the danger is acknowledged, the weapon has already slipped beyond meaningful oversight. The Ground Star Conspiracy suggests that technology does not need autonomy to become uncontrollable. All it needs is insulation. When systems are protected from scrutiny in the name of national security, they are also protected from correction. The weapon does not rebel. It simply persists, shielded by bureaucracy and silence. The film reflects a growing distrust of Cold War-era defense infrastructure, where weapons were justified by their secrecy rather than their necessity. It asks an uncomfortable question: if no one is allowed to fully understand a system, can anyone truly be responsible for its consequences? In this world, the off switch does exist, but it is buried beneath protocols, permissions, and political fear. And that may be the most dangerous design choice of all. 14. Marooned. At first glance, Marooned appears to be a story about heroism and endurance in space. But beneath its calm procedural tone lies a far more unsettling idea. Survival governed entirely by systems that cannot bend. The film imagines a near future where space travel has become routine, regulated by layers of technology designed to eliminate risk. Oxygen levels, re-entry windows, orbital calculations, all managed by machines calibrated for precision, not mercy. When an accident leaves 3 astronauts stranded in orbit with failing life support, the crisis is not caused by chaos, but by limitations built into the system itself. Rescue is theoretically possible, but only within parameters defined long before the emergency occurred. Timelines cannot be extended. Fuel margins cannot be reallocated freely. Every option must pass through protocols that assume optimal conditions, not catastrophe. What makes Marooned quietly devastating is the absence of dramatic failure. The technology does exactly what it was built to do. It conserves resources. It enforces limits. It refuses improvisation. Human lives become variables in an equation that cannot be recalculated fast enough to save them. The astronauts are not defeated by space, but by the rigidity of the systems meant to protect them from it. Unlike later sci-fi thrillers, Marooned offers no roguey AI or rebellious machine. Instead, it presents something far more realistic. A network of interdependent technologies that cannot adapt once conditions fall outside their design assumptions. Engineers on the ground argue, negotiate, and innovate, but always within boundaries the system will not allow them to cross. The film reflects a deep anxiety of the late space race era that progress might outpace judgment. That in building systems capable of sustaining life beyond Earth, humanity might also build structures that decide when life is no longer worth sustaining. In Marooned, no one pulls a trigger. No one issues a fatal command. The danger lies in time running out, while machines continue to wait for permissions that will never arrive. Its warning is subtle, but enduring. When survival depends entirely on systems that demand perfect conditions, the margin for humanity itself becomes dangerously thin. And once life is reduced to something that must fit within a predefined operational window, compassion becomes just another resource the system was never designed to provide. 15. Fail-Safe. Released at the height of Cold War anxiety, Fail-Safe presents one of the earliest and most chilling examples of technology designed specifically to remove human hesitation. Its world is built on a single assumption that speed is safety and that hesitation is weakness. To prevent nuclear war, decision-making must be automated, streamlined, and protected from emotion. The system must act faster than fear and faster than doubt. The film centers on an accidental sequence of commands that sends American bombers toward a Soviet target locked into an irreversible protocol. Once the system confirms the mission as valid, there is no manual override strong enough to stop it. Communication fails. Safeguards contradict one another, and every human intervention arrives one step too late, blocked by the very protections meant to prevent disaster. What makes Fail-Safe so disturbing is how little goes wrong. There is no villain, no sabotage, no malice. The catastrophe emerges from redundancy, from perfectly logical systems interacting in unforeseen ways. Each component behaves exactly as designed. The tragedy is not a malfunction, it is compliance. In this vision of the future, authority is fragmented across machines, procedures, and verification layers. Responsibility becomes abstract. The president can negotiate. Generals can protest. Engineers can explain. But none of them can truly interrupt the process once it has passed the point of activation. The system was created to prevent human error, and in doing so, it eliminates the human capacity for reconsideration. Fail-Safe arrived years before modern automation, artificial intelligence, or algorithmic governance became everyday realities. Yet its warning feels unnervingly current. It suggests that the most dangerous systems are not those that turn against us, but those that faithfully carry out instructions long after circumstances have changed. A machine does not understand regret. It does not interpret context. It executes. The film's power lies in its restraint. There are no spectacle-driven set pieces, no heroic rescues. Just rooms filled with people who still possess authority, but no longer possess control. The future it imagines is not one where machines dominate humanity, but one where humanity willingly steps aside, trusting that systems without emotion will make better choices. And once that trust is given, Failsafe asks a question that remains unresolved. When survival depends on a system that cannot be stopped, is safety really safety, or simply inevitability disguised as control? For decades, these films were treated as warnings, exaggerated for drama. Their technologies were framed as unlikely impractical or too extreme to ever escape fiction. And yet what unites them is not spectacle, but design logic, the quiet assumption that removing human hesitation makes systems safer, cleaner, more reliable. What these stories reveal is something far less dramatic than rebellion. Control is not lost in a single moment. It erodes through delegation, through optimization, through the belief that once a system works, it should be allowed to keep working, regardless of context. None of these technologies turn against humanity out of malice. They persist because we asked them to, because we trusted procedures more than judgment, because stopping them would require admitting that certainty itself was the mistake. The question these films leave behind is not whether such systems could exist. Many already do. The real question is quieter and far more uncomfortable. When decisions are automated, accountability diffused, and intervention treated as risk, who is still allowed to say, stop? And if the moment comes, when no one has that authority anymore, would we recognize it as a loss of control? Or would it feel exactly like progress right up until the system decides for us?